In November 2001, a Japanese woman was found dead in a snow-covered field near Detroit Lakes in the United States. Her name was Takako Konishi. She was alone, lying in the snow with no visible signs of violence. The temperature was low enough to kill a person within a few hours. She didn't survive. Speculation quickly began. The police, unsure of exactly what had happened, tried to retrace her final steps. Takako had left Japan a few days earlier. She passed through Chicago and then headed into the interior of the country, toward the state of Minnesota and the North Dakota region. Along the way, she was seen by several people. Witnesses said she spoke English with difficulty and seemed to be searching for something. In one account, she had reportedly asked where Fargo was, which drew attention. Some immediately associated it with the Coen brothers film released in 1996. The movie's plot involves a suitcase full of money buried in the snow near a fence. That was enough to spark rumors. Takako had watched the film, believed it was based on real events, and traveled to the United States to find the money. This version spread quickly. News outlets began reporting that she had died trying to find a fictional treasure. The story became a legend. The Japanese woman who confused cinema with reality. A case that mixed tragedy with a touch of the absurd. But there was one problem. None of it was true. Takako Konishi was real, but what happened to her was far more serious than it seemed. Two things need to be said. Takako Konishi wasn't after buried money, and that photo spread on the internet wasn't her either. But let's go step by step. The truth is that Takako Konishi did not come to the United States chasing a movie. She wasn't looking for any money. What brought Takako to Fargo was something harder to explain, and unfortunately, more common than it seems. Takako worked in Tokyo at an advertising company. She had an apparently normal life. After a few years, she was fired, shortly after a relationship of hers ended. It's unclear whether it was a romantic involvement or just a close friendship, but it was an important person. And that person, according to some reports, lived in the United States. She decided to travel there, and she went through several cities, making stops that didn't make much sense for a typical tourist itinerary. Instead of visiting major landmarks, she moved away from urban centers. She bought maps, tried to communicate with locals, and at some point seemed confused and disoriented. Some people said she was crying. The police managed to recover a letter she left behind. It was a farewell note. Its full translation was not released, but it made clear that Takako was dealing with deep emotional pain. In other words, what happened to her was not a naive mistake. It was loneliness. It was anguish. It was the result of suffering that had likely been building up for a long time and silently reached its limit. The version spread on the internet of the Japanese woman hunting movie money erased all this. It turned a real tragedy into a curiosity story. And because of that, many people failed to see what was really behind it. And that brings us to an important point. Over time, the story of Takako Konishi began spreading across the internet. But what circulated wasn't the truth. It was a distorted version with a touch of urban legend. And it was in the middle of that wave that an image began to surface, one that many people started associating with Takako. The photo showed a woman in a snowy landscape holding a camera and taking a picture. The framing looked lonely, almost cinematic. It was the kind of image people share without checking, simply because it seems to match the story they heard. And so it spread. The photo appeared on forums, blogs, and social media, always accompanied by captions like Takako Konishi's last photo or her before she disappeared. But the woman in the image wasn't Takako. The person in the photo years later came forward. She confirmed it was her in the picture, that the photo had been taken in a different context, in a different place, and that she had no idea her face had been used to illustrate someone else's tragedy. In other words, the face that many had come to associate with the so-called Fargo money hunter was actually that of a complete stranger, someone entirely unrelated to the story. The story of Takako, although it has been distorted and surrounded by various sensationalist theories and versions, carries an important lesson about real life, the necessity of taking care of our mental health. It reminds us that behind rumors and myths, there are real people with real feelings, and that moments of emotional fragility deserve attention, understanding, and support. More than curiosity or legend, Takako's story highlights the importance of valuing our emotions and seeking help when necessary.